You're listening to Retail Media Unboxed, the podcast that goes behind the scenes of the fast-evolving retail media industry. In this one-on-one interview series, we sit down with top industry experts to unpack the trends, insights, and strategies shaping the future of retail and advertising. Retail media has exploded over the past few years, largely fueled by digital channels, closed-loop measurement, and performance-driven thinking. But here's the reality. More than 80% of retail transactions are still happening in the physical world. So the question becomes, are marketers missing the most important part of the funnel? Joining me today is Chris Grosso, CEO at Intersection, an experience-driven media and technology company operating at the center of urban life. From LinkNYC kiosks in New York to transit systems across major U.S. cities, Chris is helping redefine how brands show up, not just on screens, but in the real world, at the exact moment decisions are being made. Chris, welcome to the show. I'm so pleased to have you on today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Richard.
So to get us underway, can you tell us about Intersection and what you do there?
Sure. So I'm the CEO of Intersection. We are an experience-driven out-of-home media and technology company. We work in major U.S. cities. Most notably, we run the LinkNYC program in New York, where we do the sales and marketing for that. We also work very closely with other cities and transit authorities to both bring their customer information systems, their bus shelters, and their advertising to them in places like Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, and San Francisco, and most of the major U.S. cities.
Excellent. Well, I'm from Seattle, so I should know a little bit about this as we move forward, but you'll be the expert nonetheless.
Do you take Sound Transit?
I have, yeah. Actually, more and more so all the time. I actually divide my time between Portland and Seattle. My entire family lives in Seattle, so whenever I'm up there, I take the train up there, and then I take Sound Transit to go see them.
Yeah, Sound Transit's booming right now. We do the advertising for them. They just expanded the system. Really good example of transit systems growing and well needed in Seattle for sure, given all the traffic.
Oh yeah, it's never been ideal in Seattle in terms of traffic. Retail media has largely been defined by on-site and then off-site digital environments. Where do you see digital out of home fitting into that ecosystem, and why is the physical world becoming such a critical extension of a larger retail media strategy?
It's a good question. Look, retail media has been booming. It's been booming for a long time, and a lot of that's taken place online. And that makes sense given where the history of the industry is. But when you actually look at retail, more than 80% of the retail sales are actually taking place in physical space. They're taking place in the offline environment, yet the vast majority of retail media is spent online. So we think there's a big opportunity both for retail media in the stores right at the point of purchase and on the path to purchase right outside the stores. So digital out of home, oftentimes, particularly in malls or in center cities, have advertising that's literally within 10, 20, 30 feet of the store right before you go in. That's a great place to reach people before they're making transactions. And given that 80% of these transactions are being made in store, we think it's a huge opportunity for retail media to start leveraging digital out of home, particularly in these locations that are very close to the retail stores.
We often think of lower funnel intent as something that happens online. How does digital out of home capture high intent, sort of real world moments? And what kinds of environments or signals make those moments so valuable for brands?
So in out of home, we have the advantage of location and day part. Those are really the core places on how you can target digital out of home advertising. So location, if someone's within 50 to 100 yards of a store on the streets of New York and next to a Link kiosk, of which we have hundreds right outside of drugstores, they're likely on their way to go buy something. And the opportunity there to get people into the store and actually buy something is very high. And we see through data studies that we've done, people seeing the ad, the foot traffic for people who have seen the ad significantly higher than the people who don't see the ad. So you drive foot traffic into the store, and then we also see uplift in products that are advertised right outside the store, and it's intuitive for that reason. Secondly, we have day parts. So one of the best examples, we do this with many of the coffee companies who sell quick serve coffee, is every one of them, when they do advertising right near their stores and promote coffee right near their stores, they see uplift in visits to the store, and they see people drinking more coffee. And they do that at 5, 6, 7 a.m. in the morning when people are about to get their cup of coffee. So this is intuitive. But when you take the combination of location and day part and being able to geo-target advertising at the right time of day that people are prone to do purchasing, we think it's a huge opportunity. And when we've seen this, now we can do this anecdotally. We're not, no one's really doing this at scale, but when you look at this anecdotally, every time we've looked at these studies, you can really see people both driving traffic into stores and then buying more in the stores when they see the promotion outside the store.
It's interesting. It kind of leads me to my next question, which is, you have these assets like LinkNYC, major transit systems. You're at the center of urban life. What other types of contextual relevance, aside from perhaps where someone is, you mentioned time of day, are there others that translate into stronger outcomes?
Yeah. So what we often see is events are it's a variant on time of day, but we see a lot of impact from different kinds of events that will drive retail behaviors. And, an example of that might be advertising around a concert. It can be very, oftentimes we can tie it back to uh, products that the artist is really behind. So, if you're going to a concert at Madison Square Garden, you're going to see the artist might have their own brand of product. They might have brands of products that they endorse in stores. You can definitely see a lift there. So being able to advertise around these big events that are happening in the fabric of urban life often can translate into sales if they're properly contextually done.
That's interesting. There's a lot of talk about omni-channel, but not always a particularly clear execution plan. How should marketers, in your mind, think about the interplay between out of home and retail media networks to drive awareness and measurable conversion?
I think it really goes to your reach extension. So, to the extent you have a campaign where you were trying to drive people into stores to purchase stuff, or at the end of the day, right, you're trying to drive people to purchase things, I think you want to take a look at where those purchases are happening and where you can find the people on their way to that path to purchase. And there's really two ways to do that. First is just geofence the store. I mean, it's not rocket science, but the impact's huge because someone walking by the store is either on their way into the store, in which case they're going to be more likely to make that purchase, or actually go into the store because they get prompted on there. So that's the one level of geo-targeting. The other geo-targeting is, there are neighborhoods that will over-index in your intended purchasers, and you can target those neighborhoods very tightly, and that can then lead to people also making those kinds of purchases.
I want to dive into metrics for a little bit here. Retail media has pulled marketers deeper into performance metrics. Do you believe we're now at risk of over optimizing for short term conversion? And how does out of home help sort of reintroduce brand building in a way that still supports measurable growth?
It's a good question. I think, you've got these when you go to last touch attribution, the last touch guy is getting all the benefit, but there's tons of work being done by all the other media channels to get you actually to make that search or to click on something when you're in Facebook. And I think the way, you want those other brand building um, metrics, those brand building channels to also get credit for that. One thing we've noticed, and we've done in our business, is tying back where we can still to transactions and a couple things or transaction indicators. And two or three ways we do that. One in particular is foot traffic attribution. So, if we know that seeing an ad, that devices that have been exposed to an ad are likely to go into a store or a retail location, that provides a pretty good indicator that that advertising was pretty effective because you're driving foot traffic. So that's one lever. Um, the other lever is digital event measurement, where we can take a look at the mobile ad IDs that have been exposed, a subset of the phones that are exposed to a advertisement in the out-of-home space can be matched back, and we can take a look at whether or not they took a digital action from that. And oftentimes, you'll see a significant lift in digital events. So, foot traffic and digital events both give you pretty good metrics on the actions people are taking after seeing these ads. Now, what we found is these metrics, when you properly adjust and look at them, they actually give you a pretty good return. And part of the value of out of home is this can be a relatively decent performance media. May not be as good as search, but a relatively decent performance media. And you get this massive benefit in brand building, because when you do an ad campaign, if you buy 30 Ultra Super Kings in the city of Chicago, you're going to reach everybody in Chicago 3 or 4 times. And then if you can couple that with, and by the way, you've driven, uh, 75% lift in foot traffic for everyone exposed, you're like, hey, on a performance basis, this is pretty good. And I got all this brand building. And I think ad formats that can both give you good enough performance, but also have the benefit of building brand, that's kind of the killer thing that marketers should be doing. And honestly, out of home is a great way to do that.
Measurement has always been one of those things that out of home has had difficulty with. What else may have changed in recent years that allows marketers to connect those dots, that out of home exposure to retail outcome, especially as it relates to in store? I could see, like you were mentioning, kind of the alluded to the online point, but I'm curious to know, especially given your earlier statistic about how much retail purchasing actually happens in stores still, how do they measure that? Is that difficult to do, or is there a certain process that has to be followed to ensure that those dots are connected? Or, for a layman like me, what might I be missing?
So you've really got two paths, right? One is, are you getting foot traffic? And foot traffic attribution is very straightforward to do in the out-of-home space, because with foot traffic, you're looking at devices that have been exposed to an ad, and do they show up in the store, and does the device move from one point to another? Very straightforward to do. And for a lot of retailers, that has a big impact. And knowing people go to stores and are hitting the stores is a big impact. So that's kind of like the first piece. The second piece, where you have to get a bit more sophisticated, is um, can you work with some of the data clean rooms, where, because of mobile devices now, everyone's got a mobile phone in their pocket, and there are networks of third parties that now can gather some of that geolocation data and the timestamp data and understand whether those devices have been exposed to the ad. You can go into a data clean room environment, and there are several providers that do some of this. And the data clean rooms can then start to match back whether or not these people have actually transacted. And I think the fact that now everyone's got a mobile phone really does allow you to start seeing what the lift would be. And it's not through a QR code or anything like that. It's more, has this phone been exposed to this ad, and then what happened downstream from that?
Interesting. You've spent your career helping traditional media evolve for digital. Now we're seeing a convergence of physical and digital through out of home, retail media, et cetera. What do you feel the next generation of, let's call it media infrastructure, what does that look like from your perspective?
I think it's all about experiential. I think that Gen Z in particular, but all of us, we lived through the pandemic. We realized we want to be in real life. There's no substitute for real life. Uh, Gen Z wants to be back in real life. They want to go to movie theaters. They want vinyl records, and they want to have these experiences. And to the extent you can build experiences in physical space, that's a very powerful way to build brands and to drive actions. The internet is very crowded. Digital is very crowded. It's hard to break through. When you're on the street, you break through and you see it, and it really matters, and it's very
And
visceral.
when we're thinking of the modern experiential sort of presence, and let's hypothetically call it in an urban environment. Have you seen anything that, from your perspective, has surprised you, delighted you in a way that, hey, this is the future. This is what I'm talking about. Do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I think anything that's, call it awesome, and is what's good. And this isn't a retail media example, but Giant Spoon put a gigantic dragon that was uh, on top of the Empire State Building in New York City, and this was for the HBO show, not the Game of Thrones, but the Game of Thrones sequel, and that was awesome. You put a dragon on top of Empire State Building, and that's worth more than, you know, infinite amount of 30-second spots that are running on connected TV, because that was cool and that's something that people would talk about. We at Intersection, one of our examples, we worked with Red Bull to put a F F1 car on the train tracks in at the CTA in Chicago, where the L train, and we had the F1 car running around the L train on in Chicago. Got tons of pickup. Everyone saw that. Another time in Chicago, we actually put a car on top of the bus shelter. We put a Land Rover on top of the bus shelter, and the amount of earned media you get from that, because it's cool, it's interesting, it's innovative. That makes a huge difference. Now, is that gonna tie directly back to a retail media sale or something like that? No. Is that gonna, really build a brand and people really talk about it? For sure. So I think that's a huge example. But there's also simpler examples too, which get into the fabric of these cities that happen on every day. For instance, the New York City Marathon is our biggest advertising day of the year in New York City, and all we're doing is doing takeovers of advertising and content throughout the marathon route. And when you can get that context with thousands and thousands of people around who are there to root on their friend, running the race or rooting on their friends, I think that that's a pretty powerful place for a brand to be
We're
to
hearing a
be at.
lot about, the creator economy. I mean, it's really, in my mind, is every bit as big and every bit as powerful as all of this artificial intelligence stuff that we're, currently trying to figure out what to do with. And then you also mentioned, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, who for them, creators resonate maybe quite a bit more, depending upon the ones you talk to, than some of the big brands that are out there, that sort of thing. Are you seeing contributions or a willingness from these creators to participate in experiential or out of home?
Yes, creators love to be in the out-of-home business. So, for instance, we have several creators who are regularly appear on Link and give us content specific to Link. For instance, Haley Bailey, who's Haley Khalil is her actual name, does a ton of work with us, and can create these really cool videos that resonate really well in the at-home um, experience, and people walk by and it really stops people in their tracks, and they want to watch these people just like they see them on on the phones. And I think to the extent brands are leveraging these creators to help drive their sales and their products, the ability to put the creator that is tied to your brand right outside the store that you're selling your product is a really powerful tool to get people to transact in the way that you
Yeah,
want
it's
them to.
interesting. Going back to something earlier that you said about, making the comparison to search. If I don't know you exist, I don't know to search you. But if I see you in my travels in a big city, especially doing something cool, and let's, be ambitious and put it on top of the Empire State Building, then I definitely keep that in mind. It's a really fascinating approach. Um, Looking ahead,
Yeah, and in the retail space, is we're seeing a lot of great stuff around companies doing sampling on the street, and in a glass truck around the city and sampling their products at street level. I think that's a great thing, and that's going to drive people into the store because they're getting a little sample, and they're going to have to eventually get a bigger bottle of the
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. Looking ahead, are there technologies that you have seen or feel that are coming that you're particularly excited about? Or is this kind of more left up to the human imagination at this point?
Well, I think you need both. I think the human imagination is really important, and what we love about this industry is at some level it's somewhat AI proof because we're not going to get disintermediated by Chat GPT because people are going to walk down the street, and you need the creative angle for a lot of these really good campaigns. But on the flip side, artificial intelligence will have some impact on this industry in a positive way in two areas. The first is creative optimization. So now, we talked about digital screens right outside of CVS. With AI, you could have a custom piece of creative in front of every CVS that's highly tailored to that block, the people on that block, and the types of products that need to be sold at that location. So I think, and AI can help you do that in terms of creative optimization. So that's very exciting. And then the second area that's really exciting for AI is that out of home in general has been very difficult to buy because it's a highly fragmented industry. And now using AI and agents, you can put together these media plans in a much more sophisticated way that would be hard for a human being to do. We've got 2,000 link units in New York, 4,000 digital screens. It's not the easiest thing in the world to pick the 125 absolute best units, but now using AI, we can do that very quickly and seamlessly to pick the exact right units to reach your demographic at the timestamp at the time box you need at the locations you want.
Amazing. Well, Chris, this has been absolutely fascinating. If one wanted to find out more about yourself and Intersection, where should they go?
www.intersection.com, or just walk the streets of New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and you can see all of our products there.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for taking part in the show today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.